just walking up will be a few minutes. But it's going to go ahead and start recording.
Well, don't you introduce or anything?
I will introduce, yes.
Is it 9 o'clock?
It's getting there.
It will be in about 1 minute.
Oh.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Terry's Talks live at Snowmass. We appreciate all the people who welcomed us in Boulder, and in Snowmass today we are going to be recording live. Just a few updates. We will be doing a Zoom. Get confused. We're doing YouTube Live today. We're doing a Zoom series for a couple weeks for the rest of the month, going back to Terry's regular talks about mystics around the world. We'll be doing that coming up, and then also be on the lookout for something from Seekers of Silence. We'll be doing that through the fall and doing a series there. But today this will be recorded, and Father Terry will begin speaking. We've got a few people just walking up, so give us a few minutes and we will get started.
All right. I'm going to make sure this thing is connected. Can you hear me on there?
Yep, you're perfect.
Okay. Are we ready?
We are ready. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody out there in the Zoom world. As you might be able to see, we are recording this one outdoors because what we thought we would do is invite the local Roaring Fork community to come and sit out on our lawn and enjoy the talk. And so far, 2 people have shown up. So we don't think the Roaring Fork Valley is our market. It's probably you out there in the Zoom world. But we do love the Roaring Fork people because, I don't know if the camera can see it, we have flowers blooming all over the place just for the people who would show up today. But maybe you can now see them on the screen. We said just a perfect day, the middle of July. Flowers are blooming here on our front lawn, and this is our monastery behind us. So, and well, I did have some books that I'll just mention 2 of them for now, since some of the things I'll be talking about have to do with Thomas Merton, and these are 2 that I've read recently that we have in our bookstore. One is Shaped by the End You Live For, and it's a little book. See, it's not very thick, and it's Thomas Merton's Monastic Spirituality. You might say, well, I've read Thomas Merton, I must know this. But it is put together by a woman named Bonnie Thurston. And anything you read by Bonnie Thurston is going to be pretty good. And she did her PhD on Thomas Merton. And she's very good, not only in explaining him, because why would you want to read a book just talking about him? You want to know what he said. She's got both of them in here. So this is Shaped by the End You Live For, right here in our bookstore. And the other one is A Focus on Truth, Thomas Merton's Uncensored Mind. Also a very good book. And another thing about both of these books is they are current. This one is 2021, this year. These are not books that have been around for 10 years. You probably read them and they're someplace in your bookshelf. So, one of the things I want to, or what I thought I would focus on a little bit more today is some of the things that I've experienced here in the monastery that I think can help you where you are in your just daily life. For instance, what we have is a lot of silence and solitude. You would expect that you would get silence and solitude here. So there's a lot of opportunity for that. And I have found, even if you look into, if you would just listen, I don't know wherever you are, if you're in a country place like we have, sometime in the afternoon, probably between 2 and 4, even the birds don't sing. It is so peaceful and so quiet here. And I've never noticed that in a city. So that's something to just find out. There might be situations in which you can just be in profound silence. And what I found in this was, a lot of us, we studied with, say, Thomas Keating. He talks about centering prayer and suggested centering prayers twice a day, 20 minutes or so. And what I've noticed is, and we don't give enough to it, is just the prayer of sitting quietly, not trying to think of anything, not trying to come up with something or conjure up God or have good holy thoughts. Just sit and be at peace, not trying to figure out some situation, and let that be a prayer. It's kind of a meditation, just being with yourself, and I think a lot of times you have a sense of a presence with you in that silence and that stillness. And I think that's a good form of prayer. And we probably don't do enough of it. If anything, we get kind of antsy if we're all by ourselves with nothing to do. And I think to be all by yourself with nothing that you have to do is a great opportunity to just be and see what kind of happens. And maybe that other times that you meditate will help to engender quite a good experience. Because often, as all of us know, we'll try to meditate formally with a method, and we'll say, oh, I was distracted, and so on, that didn't work. But rarely do I just sit peacefully in stillness and not find it very rewarding and very fruitful. So consider that sometimes, instead of saying, well, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes in the morning, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes in the evening. The rest of the day I'm going to go around and get a lot of things done. My suggestion is stop in different parts of the day, the middle of the day, or I try to do it in this afternoon time. And just sit, be quiet, and see what happens. One of the things that I have found is that with this solitude, I've now realized it's solitude that I've been seeking. And what we find many times is we misinterpret the desire for solitude and the being in solitude as loneliness. Because we're alone, for one thing. It's quiet, and we're not getting something done, or we're not talking to someone. And it's often interpreted as loneliness. And I think a lot of this has to do with just the culture. I remember as a boy having times when I was alone and felt that there must be something the matter with me because I wasn't doing something. I didn't have friends around to play with. But what I noticed was I wasn't particularly unhappy. I was just taught to be unhappy, that I should be doing something, I should be playing, or something like that. And it was just the opportunity. I think what it is God offers us, I'll speak on it for myself, an opportunity to be quiet and sort of still, just with yourself, because you're not with yourself, you're with God, and begin to make friends with that experience, because that is solitude. But it's often interpreted as loneliness. And that's part of how the culture gets in the way. A lot of people, they feel they have to be listening to music, have their ear pods in. They just have to have something going on. You get in the car, you turn on the radio. And of course you have good reasons for it. You have certain music that you like. You want to catch up on the news. What's going on in Aspen or something like that. And so what if you don't find out what's going on in Aspen at the moment? You'll find out eventually if it's important. But that just being in the car and going someplace is an opportunity to just be with yourself. I have found, and I'm preaching tomorrow here at the monastery, and I think I'm going to talk about that one of the things that this silence and solitude does, and the kind of having some sort of regularity about your day, routines, not ruts, because ruts you can't get out of. A routine is something that's the pace of your life, but for some reason you could change, you could adjust. You won't get all upset about it. When you're in a rut, you just won't move. And the monastery is not about being in a rut, but it is about having a certain routine. And so we have a schedule. It's not a full day schedule, but there's certain things that we're going to do at certain times of the day, in between which there's a lot of possibilities for differences going on. But it's enough of a routine. And what's the point of that? And I think, for me, I've discovered the point of it is to have a certain stability. We hear in the monastery talk about stability, and we think it's, oh, stay here. Stay in one place. That's stability. Be stable. But I don't know that it's that in particular. I mean, yes, but you could stay in one place and be in a rut. You just would never grow. What I think it is about, that I've discovered for me, it's what I call stability of heart. The routines that you have established during the day is to allow your sort of insides, we call it the prayer of the heart, to just say the same thing that would be going on when you're just sitting quietly in the afternoon with yourself, as I started out with. So it's to establish a stability of heart, a certain stillness within. You get the solitude, the quiet without, but that doesn't mean quiet within. And what I mean by stability of heart is you begin to realize that what you used to think is one thing is really another thing. An example of that is, I can't find God. Somebody said, I can't find God. I try to pray, and it's just all darkness. There's nothing there, or I don't think God really exists. Things like that. Or even in your prayer, sometimes, if you don't have a stability of heart, you sometimes will, many times, all the time, you will interpret a prayer in which you don't sense anything's going on. You're not feeling better. You don't sense God's presence. And you'll immediately interpret that as some sort of a failure. The prayer didn't work. It was a waste of time. Oh, well, whatever. When in fact, I think what stability of heart tells us, and John of the Cross really said this, is that God is light. All right. But when God is, it's a light that we can't take it in. Encounter God's fullness of light because it's just too bright. It's like looking directly at the sun. You can't do it. Your eyes cannot look directly at the sun. You do not. Light. So God comes to us. And when God gets really close to us, the light becomes so pure, so direct, that it appears in darkness. When we see the darkness, it's really the light of God, the light of Christ, my tradition. So, the stability of heart would say, when I'm sitting there, I bring my eyes closed. I'm trying to meditate. What I sense is there's not a lot of thoughts going on. I'm not focusing on thoughts. And I'm not working my imagination trying to conjure up visions of God, holy cartridges, or whatever. And I just experience kind of an empty darkness, let's say. And I'm sure everybody has that. And they think, well, Something else must be going, where's God? Well, so close to you that the darkness is just dark. And what the stability of heart begins to know, because it has the sameness about day by day, it begins to realize, oh, it's the presence of God. I'm just fine. Now, how that begins to work later in the day, or the rest of the day, little by little, I'm not saying I'm there at this point, is that this sense of presence that you had in the darkness of your meditation begins to, if you will, show up. We become aware of it. We become aware of it as we're just going about our day. So, or as it often says in various books, when you're cooking, you're not just cooking. Two people are cooking. One has a sense of presence. The others thinking about the cooking and nothing else. Or they're worried about how this is going to turn out right, so on and so forth. And I see that in terms of my own, because I cook and I bake. And I say to myself sometimes, why are you getting, what is this? You're going on a tangent of upsetness about this bread doesn't look like it's turning out right. It wasn't like it was last week. Blah, 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 blah. Why are you here, Terry? That's the question I keep asking. Are you here to be a bread baker? Or are you here to be who God made you to be, and you happen to be baking bread at the moment? And I think this is what Merton says in both of these books. And I mentioned this in a previous talk. He was the novice master, and he said, you're not here to be a monk, you're here to be yourself. You learn to be who God made you to be. You happen to be a monk. So you're learning to be yourself, you happen to be baking bread. And becoming who you truly are. I mean, you always are who you truly are, but you don't know it, so you keep trying to be somebody else. And that's often what happens. We see that at once. We keep trying to be someone else, for someone else. Either the culture wants us to be this, or some other relationship wants us to be this. You have to become you. And so there's not some homogeneous monk in the monastery. There's not this ideal monk. There's an individual person who's trying to become himself or herself, and they're doing it in the monastic life. In other words, your vocation, that is what you're doing, is the way that you will become. You will realize who you truly are, who God made you to be. And once you become who you truly are, then you will be most able to be of use to other people, because that's why God made you, to do a particular something for and in the world. Even in a monastic situation, we are for the world by being ourselves. In other words, if you're going to be a Trappist monk, you don't go out in the world. That's not the part of your vocation. But yet, I mean, we're not parish priests. So we don't necessarily have to go out into the world. But if for ourselves, enough of the world will be attracted to us that we will serve their search for spiritual growth. And I think all that comes with a bit of a stability of heart that you gradually develop, having some routines in your daily life, but not being in a rut. Now, this solitude, which will be part of the solitude and then the interior silence from the stability of heart, this solitude, I think, begins to make room for God. So if I'm sitting out in the backyard in a chair at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, none of the birds are chirping away, it's just peaceful, nobody else is around, I'm just sitting there quietly in solitude. I think what I'm doing, well, I don't think about what I'm doing, but if I had to reflect on it, I'm making room for God. I'm not reading a book. I'm not trying to solve a problem. I'm not doing a task. I'm making room for God. so that I can make room for what God cares about. So in other words, I'm sitting back there without a particular care at all. So my sort of care box is empty, and I'm ready to have God put some things into it, which is what God cares about. Sometimes we get into fixing the world, or think we should fix the world, which is a lot of ego energy. It's a lot of your own ego. I gotta fix the world. What's God on vacation? So be yourself, and you'll do as much fixing as God wants you to do. But to do that, you got to step away from your ego having to be busy all day long fixing things. And so one of the things I have learned, another one of the things that I've learned here is, because I was very active Paul's priest, in the world, doing things, parish priesting, missions, and so on and so forth, and going around and being with friends, and all, this typical stuff. That was all very familiar to me. I was doing it for years. But we're reading Genesis now, in our book of Genesis, in our daily Mass readings, and what strikes me, and I think Merton speaks about this and how we're reading it ourselves, is God, early on, wants people to pick up from their familiar lives and move on. So you have to move on if you're going to be all that God wants you to be. Even if you mess up, you still have to move. Adam and Eve, they had to get on the move, get out of paradise. But God goes to Abram, who is supposed to be the root of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim religious paths. And God tells Abram, God shows up to Abram, reveals God's self to Abram. Hi, Abram, I'm your God. And here's what I want you to do. Leave the familiar and go to someplace you don't know anything about. I'm with you. That, I think, is powerful. If you keep looking at Genesis, you keep seeing people on the move. And they're on the move, and God's at work in their movement. So there's something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, to seek something you do not know. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that Genesis, you keep seeing people on the move. And they're on the move, and God's at work in their movement. Our technician, something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about. Left something with you, and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. So if you were something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, left something with you, and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. So if you were something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, left something with you, and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. So if you were something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, left something with you, and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, left something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, left something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something about leaving the familiar to someplace you don't know anything about, left something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at work in their movement. To help aid something and they came here. That, I think, is powerful. Energy for that is part of their sense of God's on the move, and God's at push all that out of the system, which is another way to make it so they will find so basically empty inside. So self-importance is not important to Jesus. So this solitude is really embraced. Think of all the times we had in COVID. For so many of us, we had the great opportunity for silence, solitude, and we blew it. Self-complained about it. We couldn't wait to get out. To what? Noise, busyness, accomplishing things. Think of all the times COVID was a great opportunity for some of us. So many of us, we had the spiritual, in-depth experience, and we blew it because we don't know what to do with being alone, noise, quiet, and the culture does not encourage it. Nobody makes any money. They're all about that. So solitude decrease, the listening from the heart. Because when we listen from the heart, we get that stability. Heart, that tone quiet, and the culture in which we begin to see what looks like darkness to many is really the light. They're all about that. So with COVID, we were left alone, but we had no ability to be alone. From the heart, rather we felt separate and we felt isolated. And I think this is what the culture does. It convinces us the light. They're all about that. So COVID, we were left alone, but we had no around. So we made them not only we felt separate, we had to feel isolated. Thus, we love the noise. I think this is what the culture does. It convinces us the light. I have found now that something that does COVID, we were left alone, but we had no around. So sensation that was on my mind was not only we felt separate, thus we love the noise. I think this is what the culture does. It convinces us the light. I have found now that something that COVID, we were left alone, but we had no around. So sensation that was on my mind was not only we felt separate, thus we love the noise. I think this is what the culture does. I have found now that COVID, we were left alone, but we had no around. So of course, spend time with that's part of the way we pray. Thus, we love the noise. I have found now that COVID, we were left alone, but we had no around. Our delusional thinking about ourselves, our fantasies, all this stuff is just the way we are when we don't have a deeper spiritual life, and even when we do have it, they can pop up. You just laugh at yourself and let them pass. They will pass. So not to get too worried about them, but not to shame yourself or blame yourself, such as you're a uniquely ridiculous person. You're not a uniquely ridiculous person. You're a person. And it's one of the things that binds us together, is this kind of thinking. Now, the monastery life really hits up against a lot of cultural values. I just mentioned the whole COVID thing, where we can't stand to be alone, and we can't stand silence. So the monastic life smacks up against that cultural value. It says it is silence and solitude is valuable. And another thing it says is achievements, getting things done, is not the focus of our lives. Now, in the Trappist situation, one of the things is manual labor. And you have to do a certain number of things, if you will, to pay our bills. There's no doubt about that. But the idea is this constant busyness. So we try to, in our routines, we try to keep this balanced. In other words, now there's emergencies. In the ranch, there's certain things that may have to be done now. But by and large, we can be doing certain things in a routine that includes times for solitude and silence. But many of us work alone. We don't work in groups in which we're chit-chatting. So when you're getting some things done, but with a stability of heart, you have a sense of the presence, if you will, is with you as you're going about these things. So you might get upset about something that's not working out, but you catch it sooner rather than later, and you don't go ballistic over it. So being busy is not important. Getting some things done, yes. But in other words, if I'm supposed to cook a meal that day, I cook the meal that day. So it's getting things done. It's being practical, but this sense of being busy and the need to be distracted because we can't stand silence and solitude. We think it's loneliness and we're a loser. So we like to be distracted. TV, media, sounds, or buying stuff. So what solitude really can do, and I think all these things you can do in your daily life. It's not you have to be a monk. I'm just saying what I've learned here about it that might help you is this solitude begins to set aside the herd mentality. Now it's not as if I'm going to be silent and solitude because I want to set aside the herd mentality. It's not your goal. But it comes. It's sort of a product of what happens with the times of being with yourself, getting comfortable being with you in a quiet, an interior quiet and an exterior quiet. And you just find out that the herd mentality, everybody's doing this, come on along. But there's something in you that says, no, I don't really want to. We're not mainstream. And what you learn is the mainstream of the culture is all about buying and selling. And not that buying and selling is bad, unless it's all about that. And it's all about getting rid of silence and solitude. People said, I can't wait till COVID's over so that I can what? Go to a monastery and pray? I mean, nobody say that. No. They want to get back to the mainstream, the way things were. So we set aside this herd mentality, this mainstream. What I realized up here, and I thought one of the things I really missed was certain television, the news, and certain news station at a certain time I like to watch, and that information I wanted to keep having, or Netflix. But I found out that that wasn't awakening me. I wasn't becoming. How can you become who God truly made you to be, sitting in front of a TV screen? It just doesn't work. So for the culture, a monk is a failure. A monk is a failure to the secular culture. It doesn't produce anything. Well, we do produce some things. We do hay, and we have a wonderful bookstore and gift shop and so on. So we produce some things, but they don't see us productive enough. We're not 9 to 5 getting things done, if you will. We are getting things done. Our own becoming who God made us to be. That's a hard job, which is why I think a lot of people decide not to do it. It's a hard job. So it looks unproductive because there's not something going on out there. We're not making something. Now, Jesus was making some furniture, but he spent a lot of time not making furniture, just being with Jesus, if you will, and realized that he wasn't just all by himself. He knew he wasn't all by himself. But to the world, we look unproductive. When you go to a social event, nobody says, or at least early on, how much do you meditate? No, they say, what do you do? Oh, my name is Terry. Oh, how do you do, Terry? Where do you live? And what do you do? So if I say, well, I live in a monastery, there's sort of this blank look, and they're trying to think, oh, what do you do in a monastery? Right away, it's what do you produce, doing. And if I say, well, we don't do anything. Oh, well, there's a That's kind of a con. I don't do anything. In other words, I don't do anything that you would see as doing something. So for you to look unproductive. And what I found out, especially is not being in pastoral work, is a monk is not a pastoral minister. And there are people who would like them. They would like them to be their priest, their pastor, that is, provide services for them. But we're not a pastoral supplier. We don't put on various roles to satisfy the demands of various people, which is what a priest in a parish does. He has various roles to answer the demands of various people. The bishop wants his parish to be run financially, soundly, with certain programs, A, B, C, and D, done in that parish. And another person wants something else. Another person wants something else. You keep wearing various hats for all these things. We don't wear hats. We don't do that. That's a routine. The routine to help us to grow more deeply within is pulling away from a life in which you basically wear a sign that says, what do you want, and I'll figure out how to give it to you. So we get away from that. We don't play various roles to satisfy the demands or the wants of other people. So you say, well, wait a second, how does that work for me? Well, just ask yourself, how much of the day do you spend wearing various hats, expending energy, time, for what somebody else wants? And why? There may be good reasons, but you might stop and ask yourself that. And when you sometimes just sit quietly with yourself, you never know, you might get an answer. So what I'm finding, we often talk about becoming transformed. So you want to become transformed. Well, who is this person becoming transformed? I'm not going to become transformed if I'm trying to be somebody for somebody else. That's really not me. So only me can become a transforming person. Only me can have a transforming relationship. In other words, the me of my delusional thinking, of my fantasies, is not even a real human being. And so all the time that I would spend in a fantasy is not a relationship with God, because that person doesn't exist. And God can only relate to real people, not fake people. So I don't want to be fake. I want to try and avoid as much as possible being someone I'm not, because I don't want to say no to somebody else, or don't want to say I can't. So you might ask yourself, how much time do you spend being somebody you're not? Because all those times that you're being someone you're not for somebody else, you're not really having a relationship with God, because that's not you. God relates to you as you are. So we sometimes use up so much energy to satisfy someone else instead of the energy needed to satisfy God's want to just be with us. It takes energy to sit in silence and solitude, because it takes so much energy to say no to a culture that says, A, you have to be busy, and B, you have to be busy to satisfy what I want. In other words, I only exist for the satisfaction of other people's wants and whims most of the time. So I want to have a transformed relationship with God, so I got to figure out who I am and be it. And part of that is this silence and solitude. Now, God is invisible. And one of the things I realize here, because one of the things that Trappist, if you go into our Trappist chapel, we don't have a lot of stained glass windows. We have one stained glass window, and it's what we call the Regina window. It's Mary, the child Jesus. All Trappist places have that. But our other windows are clear glass. There are no statues. There are no holy pictures or holy cards. In other words, we don't focus on images. Can, it's not our focus. Because we want to remember God isn't the picture. And often the picture that we have of God or Jesus or Mary looks ethnically just like us. So if you go to Japan and you're in a Christian church in Japan, Jesus is going to look Japanese. So it's fine, but we want to go a lot deeper than that. We want to get to the interior heart relationship. So God is invisible. But we do conjure up images, and one of the reasons I realize that I do it is to avoid boredom. It was really an issue of boredom. We just can't stand to sit and let our minds not be the focus of our prayer. Sit and not let our imagination control our prayer. So we conjure up images, and the imagination loves to be the center of attention. Images can entertain you. I don't mean like fun. I mean, the image of Jesus on the cross is not entertaining, but in the sense of it takes up the time that you're sitting so you don't, because you can't stand to be bored. And one of the reasons you're bored is because you don't realize that the darkness is really God's light. So what I find is images can be helpful as kind of starters. Especially if you're sitting down and you want to get rolling. You might have a holy card or a crucifix in your hand or look at an icon or something like that. It's a starter. But you're supposed to just use it as a starter. It's not the focus of your prayer. Because if it's the focus of your prayer, the focus becomes the imagination, the focus becomes thoughts, and the focus becomes feelings. They're fine, and they're all part of prayer, but there's a much deeper part of you that you need to get to or be taken to by God through these images. So you don't want to just stop with them. And one of the things I find is that depth is where you have the intimacy with God. You're not having an intimacy with a holy card. The intimacy is with God. The holy card is leading you, opening you to that. Now, the holy card doesn't have the power to take you to the depth. That's God. But what the card does is it keeps you from thinking about a lot of other things and helps you to think about one or two things so that you then can move into not thinking about much of anything. And at some level, at this deep level of intimacy, it's really a gift. So at some deep level, prayer, I think the prayer of the heart is a gift. And everything we use to get started in prayer, including centering prayer as a method, is all things I can do. That's not gift. The gift of deep prayer has got to come from God, and it comes when God decides to do it. But start where you are, and let the awareness of the presence just arise, if you will. Methods can be very helpful, but you don't want to focus on the method anymore. You want to focus on the holy card. I often tell people who say, "Father, I like to say the rosary." I say, "Fine. Did you ever consider being in the middle of a Hail Mary on the third decade of the Sorrowful Mystery and feeling an urge to stop and just be?" For most of us Westerners, we can't do that because we're so neurotic about finishing the prayer to please God or to get some intention met. When in fact, the rosary is part of bringing us from scatteredness to depth. It's an interim. So start wherever you are when you sit down to pray. Use whatever you need to use. And why I like that is and that's why I like the idea of just sitting sometimes in the afternoon and say, well, where am I? Just sit here quietly. The thing with methods is, the downside of the method is, for me, is you're doing this and doing that. Say, now I'm going to center. It's just too big a leap. But I got my sacred word. I'll use my sacred word, and that'll get me from here to there. And I said, why not develop a life of all the things I've been talking about previously, in which you don't have to make this sudden leap to your centering prayer practice. It's sort of, as you go through the day, because you have some stability of heart, when you do sit in a more formal meditation, it's an easier movement. Don't ask too much in the method. Don't say, I'm busy all day, now I'm going to center, because I'm feeling crazy, I want to calm down. And so, you're asking too much. And the method of prayer is not so that you can have a few minutes of respite and then continue on with the craziness of your life. That's not what it's for. It's to be part of that movement from hopefully a stability of heart, which you are aware of here and there during the day of God's presence, laughing at your absurdities and so on and so forth, so that when you do sit, it's not such a big leap. And when you're finished your 20 minutes, a half hour, you don't run back into craziness. Merton says, my life is all spiritual, or it's not spiritual at all. So you can't say I center twice a day for 20 minutes each time, and then the rest of the day I'm scattered all over the place. For this anxiety, this reason, that person, and so on and so forth. It's not that we don't have demands. I have demands on me here. It's just that you get enough of a stability of heart that you're not crazed by them anymore, and you begin to let go of some of them because you know it's all ego, either theirs or yours. You learn to say no to a few things. So Merton says, my life's all spiritual. It can't be spiritual for 20 minutes a day. So if we live who we really are, I think Merton said this too, maybe in one of those books. If we live who we really are, we'll be spiritual. Okay? We will be. We just have to be who we really are. And then it's spiritual. So this all is talking about, what do I mean who I am? Come on, what is that all about? If you are you, you're spiritual because God made us as spiritual beings. Whoops. Is it time for a break? We always say the Holy Spirit is the breath of God. You know, it is time for a break. It actually is. We've been at this for 50 minutes. Can you believe? God, you have shut me up. Now, we only have one bathroom, but we only have two people. So we're going to take a break for about 10 minutes because you out there in Zoomland have to do something. And then we'll get back to it a little bit more. Can you believe that? Blew my notes away. I'm upset with God. We'll have some things to say about that. Okay, we'll take a break.
So I apologize to our online community. Y'all were very brave. We had just audio first, and then when we got the video, then we had audio noise. So I apologize. Thanks for all your help. I do not have Wi-Fi out here, so I can't see what the product is. So it's very backwards today. And now the sun is in me too. But
now if you want to support me in my work, I think, you can't put that up on the screen, can you?
I can't on YouTube, no.
Okay,
I can, but
it's on Venmo. Most of you know what that is, Terry-Ryan-25, or just send a check to me here at the Monastery. Okay, 10 minutes, take a break.
And send an email to me if you want to find out more information. snowmassbookstore@gmail.com. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break. If you have any questions for Father Terry on what you heard or didn't hear or all the noise or whatever, please send it, or you can send it to me on email, but also just do it through the chat, and I will ask the question.
Take coffee? You don't take coffee, do you?
I do, but you know, I have to go home.
Okay, we can talk because we're off.
Yeah, you have something in the
My
oven.
family.
A few things in the oven. I will.
You're good.
Oh yeah, but your family.
They've been gone for a week and they get back today, and I was going to make some blueberry
I can't believe
muffins.
that. My notes blew at 50 minutes when we should take
Right there. Well, God was trying to tell you something.
Yeah, he was. Or she was.
Yeah.
John
Yeah.
makes beautiful blueberry
Oh, I have a cup over here.
I have my mother's
There's no
old
Rosie. She
recipe,
figured this was
and it's the best.
something to skip.
No telling with her. I think
Fine
she's
tuned
doing
at very
another
high
job.
altitude here.
Yes, isn't
Okay. Whoops, am I on?
You are on.
Okay. Well, somebody asked about the Roaring Fork Valley. Very good question. This monastery is in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. And we say sometimes, well, we're near Snowmass and Aspen, but that's only as the crow flies. Where we are looks nothing like commercial Snowmass or Aspen. These are big ranches, conservancies they're called. There'll always be ranches. And we have 3,600 acres in our valley called Old Snowmass. You go 7 miles down the road and you'll be at a 4-lane highway. And that's called the Roaring Fork Valley because there's a river called the Roaring Fork that comes out of the mountains and flows down into the Colorado, which eventually, if there's enough water, will go to Arizona and California. And so we are here, and it's about 220-ish miles from Denver, coming from the east. It's about a 2-hour ride from Grand Junction, if you're coming from the west. And if you're coming from the north and the south, it's a hard drive because they don't make highways around here from north, south, and sea. They want you to go east and west. So that's where we are. And you see no stores. On our ranch, we raise hay and a little bit of alfalfa. We have cattle grazing here, not our cattle. And we have our bookstore and gift shop right behind me. We have a chapel where we have daily mass. And so that gives you a sense of where we are. There is an airport in Aspen that functions quite well when the weather's good. But the weather's not always good. So if you want to fly into the Aspen airport, you take your chances. That it won't be closed that day due to snow, rain, thunderclouds, whatever. So, any more questions? No? Well, I'm going to talk just a little bit more, and then we'll end. It's getting kind of warm out here. For our guests, all three, one had to go, so we're down to 2 guests, plus our producer, director, and myself. So, I want to say that I said that God is invisible. We already talked about that. And starting from where you are is important. So it doesn't matter what your life's like. You just say, I want to start praying just sort of as Ram Dass said, be here, be now. And just let it be. So prayer is really who you are, not an activity you do on a to-do list. All right? So that's one of the things about methods. Now, I think methods are great. I've used centering prayer. I've used Lexio. I've used images. But we have to be careful. It's not part of our to-do list. Okay, it's time for me to sit for 20 minutes. It's my time. Get that done and then go on to the next thing. Yes, in the beginning, early on, or hopefully, eventually, we move beyond that. And I think that's what's happening, and my experience here has taught me that. Prayer becomes who we are because we have that stability of heart where there's a kind of enough stillness within from the routines of your day in which you're not spending all your energy satisfying someone else or some image that you have of yourself driven by ego. You become, with that stability of heart, a person at prayer. That's who you are. You're doing things, but with a sense of a presence as you're going along. And so, instead of becoming someone who meditates a certain amount of time each day, which you do, you become a person who is at prayer, sometimes meditating. We're always in a relationship with God. We only know about it sometimes. We'd like to know about it more frequently in our day. So God doesn't become part of our bucket list in which we focus on God now and then, by God, I got other things to do. So in a sense, since we're always in a relationship with God because God is always within us, we're always at prayer, only sometimes are we aware of this divine indwelling. And non-duality, which is a big word you hear about now in various interfaith discussions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Kabbalah, and so on, Sufi mystics, they speak about non-duality. Well, the way of looking at that is there becomes no difference between your life, daily life, and your prayer. They are both happening together. That's a non-duality. We often think of it, I'll see the world as one with me. Yes, that can happen too. It's called compassion. But in reality, there's a lot of times when stuff happens that, that's sort of out there. It's our response to what happens that gives us a sense of non-duality. An event happens, and we have a sense of connectivity to it, except, of course, when something's dangerous. So a non-duality is when prayer in my daily life, prayer stops being part of your bucket list, okay? And when someone tells me, I have no time to pray, or when I say, I have no time to pray, you know what? It probably means I'm not being myself. I'm wearing whatever mask or look or activity you want. And when you're doing that, you're not you. You're a non-self. You're not being you. You're making yourself to someone else, for someone else, to please someone else. And you find that a lot when people are young, but hopefully they grow out of it. As we're growing up, we're trying to find out who we are, and so we try different things and satisfy different people and so on and so forth. But eventually, we grow out of that stuff. So, and I think that therefore we have to give prayer some time. This kind of, we're not into where we have a sense of the presence all day long. We're not there yet. Prayer takes time. We do have to put time aside for prayer specifically so it can become more of our life. If it takes time, it needs leisure. It really needs some leisure. And boy, do we hate leisure unless we're having fun. Or I'm relaxing. I'm re-energizing myself. It takes time. You say, well, I'm going to give 20 minutes. And is that enough time? It's all the time I have. Well, ask yourself why it's all the time you have. What is all the rest of your time being taken up with? And if you don't know that answer, it's okay, because that's where you are. But as you pray, what I have found is as I do pray and give a little bit more time to silence and solitude, do that little bit of sitting in the afternoon in the silence without any particular agenda, I begin to get some answers about why I am not having enough time for prayer. And Merton, again, here's a quote from Merton. He says, we are in the fullness of time, so we don't have to stay busy. That's something to ponder. It's already the fullness of time. Why are you busy? And remember, who you are is not what you do. And so many times, especially in the Western culture, if you don't have a job, you're nothing. If you don't have something to do, you're nothing. If you're retired, you're sort of less than. You were more valuable as out there working. Retired, no, that's no good. These are titles that we're given. Employee, employer, retired, priest, monk. That people pigeonhole us. Whatever it is we are, certainly isn't what we do. So when I say, well, I'm a monk. at a monastery. What do you do? That's it. Right away, what are you doing? And so I often flabbergast them, I don't do anything. Because they don't know what to do. I don't do anything. That's pretty countercultural. Most of our self-image, and you can say I do nothing because you don't care what they think of you. You don't care what your self-image is to them. Because you know they don't have the wherewithal to take it in anyway, if that's the kind of question they ask. So much self-image is really work-oriented. And mission-driven. It's a big word in my church, mission. What is your mission? You have to spread the good news. Well, why don't you be the good news before you spread it? Instead of talking the talk, but you're not walking the walk. Here's a quote from Merton I love. He says, "Who am I when no one else is around?" You get a good sense of where you're at. Who are you when no one else is looking? Most of the time I think you laugh at yourself. And sometimes you just pity it. But you know what? God loves that person most. And God is ready to take that person to where God wants you with that person if you just stay honest. So try to say yes to silence, because silence is never spoken. It's unspoken. Say yes to the silence that you have and let go to whatever will happen. Or as someone often says in one book or another, become fire. The unknown. Remember I said Abram moving, leaving the routine and moving, staying out of ruts. The unknown is very free. And grace is the energy that will take you to the unknown. Well, then thank you all for listening in. And this is on YouTube. And it is recorded, and Chris is going to tell you where you can find it if you want to listen again. Thank you all. Now, next week, Chris is going to tell us what we're doing next week.
Yeah, July 17th, 9 a.m. We'll have a Zoom call, and you want to talk about that a little bit? Nikolai?
Berdiev.
Okay. And we'll be talking about that. And then also July 31st, that will be back on Zoom. And a lot better broadcast than this, so we apologize for this. We'll be doing these probably from the retreat house, so it's a little bit better. But we'll continue the next Zoom talks and the Secrets of Silence through Terry's laptop, which is a much better presentation. And we'll be doing 2 talks this month, July 17th and 31st. And all information is on snowmassbookstore.com. If you have any questions or anything, you can always reach us at snowmassbookstore@gmail.com. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Take care.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.